This meeting to order. First order of business is our invocation and pledge, and County Administrator will lead us.
We could rise for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead this in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
All right, next up, National Association of Counties and Virginia Association of Counties Achievement Award.
I want to recognize Katie Boyle. Katie is here with us tonight from VACO to share some good news with the group. Katie drove all the way from Richmond to see you guys and turn around and drive back to Richmond.
It's a pleasure to be here. It was a beautiful drive today. I lucked out on day one. So Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair.
Katie, if it's easier on you, I think
Yeah.
pull your mask down.
Okay.
You're pretty far away from everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. So Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Mr. Meadows, Mr. McMahon, good evening. My name is Katie Boyle. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Virginia Association of County, and I'm very pleased to be back in Montgomery County to present you with another VACO Achievement Award. So just to provide a little bit of background for your constituents who are watching from home, we were founded in 1934, and our mission is to serve and support your efforts as county officials. We support counties through our advocacy work, our educational programs, our member services, and our communications efforts. And we very much appreciate all the involvement from Montgomery County and VACO over the years. So this is our 19th Annual Achievement Awards. We established the program in 2003 to recognize counties that have adopted innovative approaches to providing public services, and also to identify programs that can serve as models for other counties. So this year was very competitive. We received 102 entries, and we selected 30 winning projects from only 19 counties. So you all are in very august company winning this year. And so tonight I'm very proud to present you with an achievement award for the Millstone Kitchen Neighbors in Need program. This is your 6th win, your 4th win in a row. So I especially want to congratulate you on your continued great work. And really what an exciting program to be able to recognize. I know program staff are here to speak about it in a little bit more detail, but just reading about it to prepare to come down here, I was really impressed by what a major impact this program has had. The submission described it as a win-win-win, feeding vulnerable people, keeping your small businesses afloat, supporting your local farmers. And I think that's really something special to celebrate. Certainly, it's been a really difficult time with the pandemic, but it's been exciting for us to see our local governments tap into a little bit of creativity to meet local needs. And just what a great project, what a great example of being resourceful. So I'm extremely honored to present you with the 2021 Achievement Award. And Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, I'll turn it over to the program staff. And then at the appropriate time, I have a plaque to present to mark your achievement. So congratulations. Staff are here.
And Katie, by the way, we were all smiling.
So I'll just say a couple things because I drew the short straw. So, but this really, it's great because it has been a group effort. It's an amazing grant. The idea came from the group as just sort of a pilot program and how could we, maybe see if this worked. And it has worked. As you guys know, we've had 2 extensions on the program all the way through the end of this fiscal year. So that's really amazing. The state's been wonderful to partner with. DHCD couldn't be a better grant partner on this, just really supporting us and kind of cheering us on, which has been nice. And then, of course, it's been really nice to see what it's done for our community, not just those receiving the meals, but the businesses that have been supported by it. And Lena gets to see that every day there at the kitchen. And Jennifer is definitely a superhero. She makes sure that we have all the right paperwork and that DHCD keeps liking us. So do you guys want to add anything?
Well, I can just say that it's been,
we've been growing this program since summer of last year, and right now we're serving about 600 meals a week. We just passed the mile marker of 32,000 meals served for the full extent of the program. And last week, we're also able to add an additional partner, a senior, low-income senior residential facility in Christiansburg, who's added on to the program to receive meals. And so it's really exciting to just see the program continue to do really well, and the need is still there. And so it's really nice to be able to use our facility and our team to respond to that. So
I guess just from the funders' perspective, this last round, I know that we came and asked, can you all partner with us for one more round? But from the funders' perspective, they were basically throwing money at us. Please, how can we continue this program? How much do you need? Are you sure that's enough? Those types of things are really great for everybody involved, for the New River Valley, Montgomery County, and the project, to show that we've, got the capability to serve and to manage the funds well, because then they get to report back that their money was well spent. So we are very appreciative of Montgomery County for their continued partnership in being the great recipient for these funds.
and that's good news for us when we look at future grants. So it's really good to showcase that. Oh, you want to do this?
Yeah, just like to congratulate you all, and I've got a plaque to present. Okay, so you would like to.
Josh knows
Oh,
the plaque
okay.
rules.
Direction
We'll
over
do the presentation there, and then we're gonna have a group shot over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Do I say cheese when you're wearing masks?
We are teasing.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Now, if we can get the full board over here with you guys as well, we want the whole group in.
It'll look very official. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
We don't want you to go back to Richmond empty. Bring a picture back.
That's right.
I'll watch you on it.
Yeah.
That's right. It'll be on Twitter.
Get everybody in frame. We can get everybody in frame. Beautiful. Let me just adjust with you guys a little bit. All right, I'm gonna take a couple on 3. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. One more. On 3. 1, 2, 3. And you were all smiling. I know it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This is my house. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't think of a better way to start a meeting. All right, next up on our agenda is the public address. We have no one signed up for a public address, but if someone would like to come forward, you would just state your name and address, and you would have 4 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to go ahead and close public address. Our next item is addendum.
No addendum tonight, sir.
Addendum. All right, continuing, we're going to go into our work session. Is there a motion to go into work session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Ms. Blevins?
Hi.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Kuchakowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, first up in work session is the New River Valley Passenger Rail Station Authority.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin Bird. Big fan of it.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your agenda tonight and talk about passenger rail. I do have a presentation. I want to make sure I handle that appropriately. Okay. Thank you. Well, we were at another exciting milestone in this multi-year endeavor, and I'll walk you through some of those milestones, make sure everybody has the same base understanding of where we've been on this journey together in the region. So I'll talk a little bit about the passenger rail progress made to date, the current stage of authority formation, and some next steps that'll be involved, and then we'll have time for questions if you all have anything. So in 2013, the Blacksburg Partnership pulled together a public-private coalition, and they've been working really hard to figure out what it would take to reintroduce passenger rail service to this community. And one of their first series of meetings, they had people from other areas that were successful in attracting passenger rail service come and talk about how they accomplished that in Lynchburg, how they did that in Roanoke. And from that, we had somewhat of a baseline understanding of the information that was going to be needed to be able to present the case for the New River Valley. The first thing was figuring out ridership. How many riders can we expect to have in the New River Valley? And that was a study that our organization prepared on behalf of the New River Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the MPO. And that was completed in 2016. So the ridership figures of 40,000 per year coming from the New River Valley is based twofold. One was surveys that we did across the region. We had a lot of people participate in that survey effort and felt comfortable about how many people responded and said how many days a week or how frequently they would ride per year. We also based that off of the number of trips generated northbound on I-81 out of the New River Valley. And that number in 2016 was 1 million trips a year. And if only 2% had a mode shift out of a vehicle into the train, we'd be able to get 40,000 riders per year, which seems pretty attainable. And I imagine more recently, that's higher than 1 million trips per year. As another piece of that study of ridership was to figure out a station location. And our organization worked with the MPO and analyzed 29 sites in Montgomery County, City of Radford, and Pulaski County that were along the rail line. And then after we identified those 29 sites, there were criteria that were applied to those sites. When you think about passenger rail service these days, every little town doesn't have service anymore. They're more of a regional hub. So we had to be able to accommodate significant parking for people to have overnight. You also had to be able to accommodate transit services, having buses be able to access the site. That was important. So that helped narrow down the list. Ultimately, we had 3 that the policy board for the MPO considered. And the top site they selected at the time in 2016 was a site adjacent to the Aquatic Center, which I think many of you all are familiar with. Now, the state is working on a station location study now. So that site is to be determined. That was a local preferred site, and more information has come to light since then, and we're working through that. We don't have any news today to report on a station location. The next piece that we needed to figure out was station ownership and maintenance. When you look at passenger rail service, and I'll show you a diagram here in a minute that explains what the state costs are, what the local costs are. One of the local costs is owning and operating a station. When Roanoke launched their service, they do not have a station currently, but the expectation is that they will build one. The Department of Rail and Public Transit has made it clear they expect a station to be present in the New River Valley for service. The New River Valley is doing the work and saying, okay, let's figure out how we can do this. Our organization, again, did a study for the MPO and evaluated 6 different organizational models. One was post locality. That's what's most common in the state. Is City of Roanoke owns and operates that space, or City of Richmond, what have you. Another option we looked at was host locality plus public-private partners. Transportation authorities are enabled in Virginia. Would it be an LLC, a corporation, or a governmental authority? There was a strong consensus through that process to develop a local government-based authority. We're all very familiar with those in the New River Valley. We have other infrastructure that's jointly owned by authorities, water, sewer, airports. We also have higher education institutions that participate with those authorities here. So that was another objective that folks around the table felt like it was important to accomplish. So when you look at what the state pays for with passenger rail service and what is a local cost, this diagram on the left-hand side is what the state will cover, and then there's a hard black line. Everything on the right side of that is local expectation. So the state will take care of the operations, and they negotiate contracts with Amtrak for service. And they will take care of capital construction on that rail line, and then the platform itself, that physical structure you're stepping onto to board. Anything on the right side of that is going to be a local cost. So the station itself, parking, as I mentioned, transit service, being able to accommodate that, it's local cost to figure that out. So when we were evaluating ownership and maintenance, we wanted to get some kind of what would it cost to operate if you looked at an authority model. So evaluating that site in Christiansburg, we did preliminary engineering work to figure out that the site was going to cost around $4.25 million to grade it and build what at the time was a 3-story station, because there's a grade elevation issue that had to be addressed. So it's going to be accomplished with 3-story building and an elevator. So we figured out that it'd be about $360,000 to operate on an annual basis of a 30-year debt service for that construction, about $250,000 for furnishings, fixtures, and equipment to upfit the space, and then about $70,000 to operate that space, maintaining HVAC, mowing, cleaning, that sort of thing. Then we were then tasked with figuring out, okay, if you have an authority, how do you figure out the equitable way to distribute the costs associated with that $360,000 a year? We evaluated that based on population, potential ridership. Some communities are going to send more people on rail, and then proximity to the station. Some are closer, so therefore you might have more ridership. Ultimately, the committee that's working on this project said it's a blend of all three, and this is what they had recommended. Part of this is being cut off, so I'll share that with you verbally versus visually here. But there's 4 communities that would have a higher expense in this model because of proximity, population, and potential ridership. That'd be Montgomery County, town of Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, and the town of Christiansburg. Those 4 partners would have about 78% of the operating cost, about 19.5% annually. And if you're looking at that $360,000 operating amount, this would equate to about just under $70,000 a year operating costs for those 4 members. Then Pulaski County 3%, and town of Pulaski at 1%. City of Radford University splitting 14.5%, so 7.25%. Giles County, Floyd County at 1.75%. And it's based on population, ridership, and proximity to the station. So all of that, though, is completely unknown at this point. That's all modeled on the site that we had anticipated there at the Aquatic Center, which may or may not come to pass in the future. We just don't know. So that's based on assumptions. It gets us in the ballpark of what operations might be. So where we are today is creating an organizational structure to be able to operate that station on the local expense side of things. Our organization had worked with our local legislators to figure out how we could put together an authority model. And this past General Assembly session, it was extremely well supported across the state for the Newer Valley to have the passenger rail station authority. The governor signed that into law and it became effective July 1st. So here we are now working on our Newer Valley homework to get this started. What that bill or that law allows is for all the local governments and higher ed in Newer Valley to participate in creating an authority. And to be able to do that, there is an ordinance that would need to be passed by governing bodies and then an agreement to execute as well. So the structure that's within the organizing documents is that there would be 10 members. There's the 8 local governments that I shared with you on that spreadsheet earlier, and then 2 higher ed institutions, Virginia Tech and Radford University. Each member would have 2 appointees, so you're looking at a 20-person board to operate that authority. And then currently in those documents, it has the Newer Valley Regional Commission as the administrative entity to support the starting up of this and moving it along. The question that always gets asked at this early stage is, what's this going to cost us? And it's our best guess is there's two tiers to think about here. The first is the general administrative cost just to host meetings, which is not a large expense. The second one is once a site is identified, and then you start looking at what it would cost to construct a station. And then you would move into having a situation where you're going to have capital project financing, operations, and then some general administrative costs, but 2 different tiers you're thinking about. One thing to point out that's really important, I think, is that the authorities have evolved over time in the Commonwealth, is that they've evolved in the sense they now have participation agreements that you could create within the authority. So if 3 or 4 units that are in the authority want to take on the capital project, the other 3 or 4 might not be as interested in that. So those 3 or 4 can create a participation agreement that isolates that risk and that financial commitment to those 4, and the others don't have, they're able to opt out. So that's something that we didn't have in place a long time ago in the Near Valley. I think it's a benefit now, gives comfort in coming into an unknown capital project situation. So next steps for this is to establish the authority by member governing bodies passing the ordinance and executing an agreement. State leadership, as I mentioned, is working on that station location. Don't have an update on that tonight, unfortunately. But we do know that the state is keenly aware of what's happening in the Near Valley. They know that we have this enabled, and they're anxious to see if the communities are going to create the authority and take the next step that they can. And so we're looking to communicate that positive, strong message, taking the next step. And the last bullet there is that we're going to continue to look for state and federal resources to help with this project financially. Congress is talking about infrastructure bill. And there's been good discussions when Senator Kane was in the region recently saying, hey, if that infrastructure bill passes, we have a great project here, or you might have other projects in the state that you would invest in that helps take state dollars out of other projects and can apply state dollars here. So that's something that we're going to be watching very closely, is to see what other resources we can bring in, so that hopefully that $4.25 million project is not expressly a local expense. I think that's it for the formal comments. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you all have on creating the authority.
Thank you, Kevin. You want to go around the table? Supervisor Shepherd, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time, but I really appreciate the work on it. It sounds like getting the authority put together is the next step. Who would orchestrate that, I guess?
So our organization can help with the administrative part of making sure all the ordinances are coming together, and then the governing bodies would make appointments. Once you have that, you all would identify 2 members to serve, and once the governing bodies make their appointments, then we'd be in position to call the first meeting of the authority.
Very good. Sounds good. That's all I have.
Supervisor Bone.
So Roanoke didn't need a station at the beginning, but now needs a station, or they knew they needed a station, but they didn't put one in, right? And a station's expensive. So is there a reason why? It sounded from your presentation that we need a station at the beginning.
Yeah.
And what changed?
I'm not sure what transpired in the Roanoke situation. We weren't close to that, although just hearing that it's forthcoming.
Mhm.
I can't speak to that directly.
Could you go back to the slide with the local costs and then the other costs?
Is it this one?
No,
Back, that one?
next one back,
Oh, yeah.
that one.
Mhm.
So with state grants or federal grants, that's not just assumed to be on the left side, that possibly can take some of what's on the right side. From like the federal infrastructure bill, if that were to pass or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Where else would the money come from?
Federal infrastructure bill is one, and then there could be other funds within Department of Rail and Public Transit that were a part of the Western Virginia Rail Initiative that are construction and investments that they would make on the left. Is that hopefully the Commonwealth Transportation Board would see fit to make some investments on the right. We just don't know yet. That's an advocacy standpoint locally.
And then lastly, is there any local input for station location?
Not that we're aware of right now, but we just haven't heard much since the governor was here in July. He made the announcement of the Western Virginia Rail Initiative. So we don't know that yet about when that becomes a local discussion.
Was it ever open for local input the first go around when?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The
right?
first round, when our organization conducted the station location study, yes, we had lots of public input on that and asked all the local governments to identify sites that met the criteria, the 29, and then MPO had public meetings as well as part of that. But in the state piece right now is to be determined.
Thank you.
Supervisor Demonts.
Kevin, thank you for the years of work that you have put into this up to this point. Also, thank you for providing some basic cost guesstimates on what we as this board need to kind of anticipate and plan for down the road. That's very helpful. This is kind of a silly question, and I'm acknowledging that before even asking it. So NRV PRSA, can it be something other than PRSA? Can it be identifiable, like if it was NRV rail or something where, you know,
That's just based on what's in the legislative
Yeah.
language. And we had to put, it was New Valley Passenger Rail Authority. We had to put the word station in because there's another state rail authority. But I'm sure
We
you
just
could
have,
do,
like,
I'm sure you could organize those doing business
Merswa
as. if
and
you felt
like
like it.
all of these other things.
Also known as.
Well, there's the organizational piece, but then, the Blacksburg Partnership has NRV Rail. It was NRV Rail 2020,
Yeah.
2020, so NRV Rail, I think they're gonna continue to have a marketing cause to build up ridership. So you might see it play out marketing through that organization.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Supervisor Blevins.
Kevin, thank you for the presentation and all the work, and this is exciting. I personally want to see this move forward for the passenger rail. If you could answer a question or explain to me on the participation agreements. So under that, members of the authority could opt out of the participation agreement. And so explain to me how an example of that. So for example, if it benefits the whole authority, why wouldn't it be a vote or an agreement with the whole authority if everyone benefits, unless it's something specialized in that area to benefit that? Could you give me a little more information on that?
In this case, I would hope that all members would want to, because I think what's there preliminarily is a pretty fair breakout based on population and local revenues to be able to support something. I think that's more of a safety clause that's there. In this model, I would hope that everybody would want to participate. But there's other authorities out there where some might not be as interested in certain projects.
So my question would be, so if authority, some members did not want to enter, and it would kind of benefits all. So I'm just trying to understand how, so it's just like saying, well, we're going to pay for this project and you're not going to have to contribute money, but you're going to all,
Right.
I guess that's a way.
The
if
whole
something
purpose of this authority is the passenger rail station.
correct
It
to
would
benefit.
seem- Right.
I guess maybe that would come into play if there was a certain area, say that the station was in Montgomery County or the town of Christiansburg versus Montgomery County, then that may play a part in a certain project that they may want to fund that maybe Pulaski wouldn't, or something
Sure.
like that. Is that an example? Okay.
Correct.
All right. And then again, I'm sure we all want to know where the station or what they're looking at, but there's no, and other than the initial public input, is there any idea that we might have a public input for that later?
I just don't know. We haven't heard anything. That's probably another good reason to create the authority from what we've heard is that it would give the state one entity to talk with about the project. Because right now, the state knows that you have 8 local governments, 2 universities that want to see this happen. And if they work with one on a station location, that doesn't seem fair. I think that's been part of the reason that the state is interested in seeing this come together soon. So they have an entity to work with.
A collaboration would be great because we could all pull all of our sources from the members together to, best suit and be economically sound as well. Well, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate your hard work.
Supervisor King.
Don't have no question, but thank you for working on this.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Well, Kevin, this has been a long time coming. I remember the very first meetings. I can't believe we're here. I would just note to answer Sherry's question that Virginia's first industrial facility authority is set up with that. And it's much better if you could get all your members invested in a project rather than have some of them say, we don't want to do the project. And that happened with Red Sun Farms, I can tell you. But anyway, the other thing I want to make note of is that Ray Smoot is on the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and he was instrumental in pushing this forward. So we have a really good ally there, as we did with Senator Kane and Senator Warner and our state reps and the current governor. Everyone's excited about this. So I'm excited to get the train on the track and do the authority. And thank you for your presentation. I think you laid it out well.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I guess I've been privy to this particular presentation a couple of times, but We've talked about it, so I really don't have any questions other than what I've asked in the past. But we hope to take the step before the first step tonight and get this thing going. So thank you very much, and Regional Commission.
Before we finish, can I ask one more question related to Sherry's question?
Sure.
Could the participation costs offset maybe if one locality wanted to provide some form of transportation option to get to the rail station? Could that be like, say, Pulaski County, Radford, and the town of Pulaski wanted to provide some sort of transportation hub? Could that be an example of where it could be used with the authority?
Possibly. I think you'd have to look at how that offsets other costs and how that gets made up. Because at the end of the day, you would have a bill to pay. And if they're providing a service in exchange for it, which there's been informal conversations about that before. So if there's those locality, they might say our public works crews could help out in maintaining some things there. So that might decrease operational costs on behalf of everybody. So a lot of that's still to be determined, but there are opportunities for that. Absolutely.
And if you had grants, you could get in-kind contributions, if you could get grants.
True.
Any other follow-up? All right, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it very much.
Chair, next up on our work session this evening, we've got Tanya Wynn with us. Been some questions in previous meetings about funding related to some of the nonprofits that we support related to the Children's Services Act. And Tanya's here to share some information on how that process works. Tanya, thank you for being here tonight.
So I'm here to give just a basic overview of CSA, which is the Children's Services Act, and that's managed by our Human Services Department. And as you all know, we are state funded with a local match. And the goal of CSA is to preserve families and to provide appropriate services in the least restrictive environment, with focusing on child welfare as well as public safety. So children that meet the criteria are brought to the FAP team, which is the Family Assessment and Planning Team, by their case manager. And the teams staff the case and make referrals for those services. And so our cases fall into two categories. They're either mandated, which are our foster care and IEP placements, or they're non-mandated, which are our community-based services. And those children are at risk of being removed from their homes. And so I know there were questions regarding our foster care placing agencies. So I wanted to just kind of describe what happens when the children are removed from their home and how we go about finding those placements. So on our mandated cases, our children in foster care, we have Montgomery County partners with Giles and Floyd counties to approve our local foster homes, which are our pride homes. And we have roughly 45 of those homes. And so they stay mostly full, as you may guess, with that low number of homes. And placement is determined basically by sibling group size. So our pride homes typically take 1 to 2 children, and they take typically want children that are younger and with less behavior problems. And so when we don't have placements, then that's when we have to move to our therapeutic foster care placing agencies. And that's where our costs increase. And I'll explain a little bit more about our funding source. So we have roughly, well, there's child placing agencies throughout the state, but we try to keep our kids local as best as we can, but it's all based on availability of our homes. So the rates of those agencies, and we roughly, like the last fiscal year, we roughly used about 10 to 11 different placing agencies, just to give you an idea of what we use. So those rates are all very similar because they are kind of competing with each other for business, for placements. And so our homes are based on availability, not by vendor. So when DSS has a child that they've removed, they start looking locally, they start looking at the child's needs. Are they a large sibling group? Our large sibling groups, like I said, always typically go to our therapeutic foster care agencies. So if they are screened for, DSS will screen them for 4E, which is a federal funding source. So if the kids are placed in a local pride home, then maintenance is considered room and board, clothing, and daycare. And that's what our federal funding will pay for. If the children are placed in a therapeutic foster care home, then they have a process called VMAT, which is the Virginia Enhancement Maintenance Assessment Tool. So that is an additional payment that goes to the foster parents. So our pride homes don't get a VMAT assessment unless they have a child that has extreme needs. A lot of that comes from maybe like a medical need. So if you have a child that has a lot of medical issues that just has a larger need, basically, that the foster parents are going to have to address, take into medical appointments, different types of things that come with that medical need. But in our therapeutic foster care homes, a VMAT is required. So if the child does not have a pre-existing VMAT, like this is their first placement, they enter the emergency rate of $1,120. And so that is along with our maintenance payment. So DSS has 60 days to assess them. And the scores are validated based on supporting documentation that they're given by the foster parents and the DSS worker, if there's any history, like whatever those supporting documents are. And so the foster parents will participate in that VMAT assessment along with DSS. So that, along with our maintenance, like I said, is our 4E funding from the federal. If they're in therapeutic foster care, they also have a case management fee, which is $326.50, which is typically paid by Medicaid. And then we have our daily rate, and this is where I think a lot of your questions were coming from. That is a basically paid by because of the level of need. And so all of your child placing agencies have a level system, basically level 1, 2, and 3. And so depending on what your needs of your child are, they will fall into those 3 categories. That will also determine, they use the levels to determine the amount of visits that the therapeutic placing agency has to make, just different administrative needs. And so those daily rates are where your biggest expense comes from, your rate that you're paying per month. So just to give an example, a TFC will cost anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 a month. So what goes to your foster parent is your maintenance and your VMAT, which is roughly right at plus or minus $2,000. And then your additional, your level, your daily rate is what CSA pays. And that is roughly your right at $4,000 per month to cover their costs, their workers, their administrative fees, any of the supervision fees, things like that. And so I pulled like our numbers that we had for DePaul in the last 4 fiscal years. And I think you all are already made aware of that, but they range anywhere from $35,000 per fiscal year to $60,000. It's roughly what we've paid DePaul. But that's basically what I had. I just wanted to focus on kind of our therapeutic foster care placing agencies, like our number that we have, and basically the rough costs. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Tanya. We'll go ahead and go around the table. Supervisor Blevins.
Ms. Lynn, thank you for the explanation of that. Go over and explain that. On the 10 to 11 therapeutic agencies that we use, are all of those nonprofit?
No.
But do you have an idea of how many?
I don't.
No, okay, that's fine. And so I understand that these services are costing more just because of the level of need and services provided versus your local pride homes. And it's dependent on availability, keeping the family unit together. If there are more siblings, obviously the local pride homes could not facilitate that, to use that. And how many, do you have an idea of how many, for last year for DePaul's, that 35,000 to 60,000? Do you have any idea of how many children that was, how many kids that was?
I do not.
But then I can just probably divide, you're saying the 4,000 to 6,000 range.
Divide that into, and that'll give you the months of service.
Okay.
So it doesn't really tell you how many children that we served, but it'll at least give you a rough number of months of service that we've paid.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Supervisor King.
Just one question. Did you say $4,000 to $6,000 and the child gets $2,000? The rest goes to administration?
The foster parents get the roughly the $2,000. So the state sets a maintenance rate. And so just to, I can give you kind of what a local home gets. So this will tell you, if you have a 0 to 4-year-old, they get $496 per month. And they also get clothing. The clothing, it's $330. If you take a 5-year-old to 12-year-old, that foster parent gets $580 per month. And a 13 plus is $735. So like on your 0 to 4, the foster parent gets right at $500. That's for everything, diapers, formula, like whatever it is that it costs to take care of that child. That's the rate that they get. So when you are a therapeutic foster home, they get that amount on top of what the VMAT assesses them to get. So that goes directly to the foster
Like
parents.
all, they get $4,000 for administration and all this.
Yes, that's to pay their social workers, the people that are actually managing the cases.
I appreciate, I used to be on the DSS board. And I do appreciate, and I've seen all that y'all do, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Getting y'all at once. So you pay DePaul, I don't know how to word this question, you pay DePaul anywhere from 35 to 60,000 a year. How does that compare with other agencies that you pay that are for profit?
It's the same. So like how I was saying, how they set their rates. So let me give you some example, because I think some that are for profit, like Family Preservation, Intercept, I believe, is for profit. So if you have a level 1 child, DePaul charges a daily rate of $117 per day. Intercept charges $137 per day. So depending on what agency, they all roughly are in the same ballpark. So the lowest was, level 1, $80 per day, and the highest is $137 per day. So like I said, they kind of compete because they all want, they want to provide a service. And so they are all setting their rates to where you're not just going to say, well, DePaul's the cheapest, let's place with them. They all set their rates very similar so that you're not looking at, let's put them here because they're cheaper. We're not going to put them here because they're most expensive.
Right,
So they set their
understand.
rates very similar.
I guess what I can't wrap my head around is how other agencies that are for profit can make a profit when DePaul's doing it, no profit, non-profit. So,
Well, you can see a little bit just where like 117 to 137. So you're getting a little bit more per month.
yeah,
So, and other agencies might provide different services. So they all provide I'm just talking about foster care, but they might have assessments that they do. They might have provide counseling services. So they have different things that they're billing for. So within those range of services is probably how they're gonna make their profits.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bone.
So the $45,000 to $60,000, that money is just, it's not actually our money. The federal government and the state government sends it through us.
It's a combination.
Right.
So if a child is 4E eligible, then the maintenance and the VMAT is coming from federal 4E funds. Medicaid is paying the case management and CSA is paying the daily rate.
Mhm.
Let's say the child is not 4E. They didn't meet the criteria through DSS, then CSA is paying that entire cost of every bit of
And
that.
that's pure county money,
But it's state and local.
state and local. And how much of it is state and how much of it is local?
Angie,
28% is local.
And DePaul doesn't get all $4,000, they get $2,000. Is that correct? Because the family gets $2,000.
the family's getting the roughly 2,000, and it all depends on the VMAT. So, the VMAT score might be 0 and they don't get any type of enhanced payment. Say they have a child with a lot of special needs, then they may get more. So it's kind of give or take. They're guaranteed the maintenance rate, which is the one that I read out of 500, so they get that. But most TFC children are going to get a VMAT. So those two go directly to the foster parent. And then the daily supervision is what goes to DePaul or all of, whichever place and agency we're talking about. Thank you.
Supervisor Demons.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for a very good presentation. It was really informative, and it's a topic I knew nothing about until tonight. So I really appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Thank you for your presentation and for the work that you do because it is so challenging. And I want to also recognize that Katie Bull from VACO is on top of everything CSA. She represents the localities very well so that, if something comes up, we're not going to be taken advantage of. Thank you, Katie, and thank you for your work. And I will tell you that just to understand these issues, it took me six years to have just a basic understanding after serving on the State Council for Children's Services. The funding sources, all the different programs, it's overwhelming. And it's not something you can just understand in a short presentation.
And we're just talking foster care.
Yeah,
We're
that's
not
like,
even talking
yeah,
residential
it's so
facilities,
much
so-
that goes into it. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost as complicated as zoning,
Yeah.
which is pretty complicated.
That's like pretty big comparison.
Would you know, Tanya, about how many agencies, whether for profit or nonprofit, like DePaul are in Montgomery County? Just even a rough guess. You mentioned Intercept. I think isn't that one in town? No.
Family Preservation, I think, still has a Christiansburg office. And Brayley and Thompson used to have a Christiansburg office, but I don't think they do anymore. I think they did, but I don't know that they're locally
So
here.
not many.
Not many. So roughly 3.
That's the only question I had. Any follow-up?
2 things to follow up real quick. How is the priority of those between the 10 to 11 therapeutic? Is it just on availability and depending on the services, or is there a priority? Like you have 3 that have the same services. How do you decide where who gets those children or not? Is it just basically depending on availability?
It's
and
all
services?
based on availability.
All based
So
on availability.
say we get a sibling group of 5, then our DSS is going to start making those calls. Do you have a foster home that would be willing to take 5 children? So we call 10 placing agencies and we have one place that can take the 5. Then that placement is through the winter.
Okay, all right, very
So,
good.
but, like if you had, let's say we had somebody in Christiansburg that could take all 5, and we had someone in Martinsville that can take all 5. We're gonna keep them as close to home as we can. So, but that's not always the case. Typically, you're calling around and it's the winner of the day who has the placement. It's not that we have a large amount to pick from.
Understand. It's very challenging and and gratifying too. Thank you for the service for this for our children. The second question would be, I just lost my train of thought there. What was that? I completely lost my train of thought, but I will get back with you for that. So I was asking about the priority. So for the, oh, here it is, the case management. This is what the question was. So DSS has a case manager for this child, and then they will have a separate case manager for the facility.
Right.
And then that's a daily rate.
Yes.
Thank you.
Isn't there a shortage of foster homes right now? I keep seeing signs.
Yes, we always need foster homes.
So
So
it's a good time to put that out there to the public that's listening, if they're interested in learning about how to become a foster parent.
exactly. So we're always in need of foster homes.
One answer to one of Supervisor Blevins' questions, Angie's over here crunching while we're talking. We paid DePaul services for 14 kids during the fiscal year.
Thank you.
Any other follow-ups? I don't hear any. So Tanya, thank you so much. I think I can speak for this board that you are very well thought of for your hard work and dedication in a very tough job, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Tanya. Mr. Chair, last but not least, under work session this evening, we have the proposed legislative priorities for 2022. You have in your packet a draft of the legislative priorities based on information that we have heard previously from the board. I know there were also a couple of suggested changes that came in that have been incorporated as well. We have sections regarding broadband, 4 points regarding education, 6 points on funding, 1 on land use, law enforcement, recreation, and 2 on transportation. I believe the ones that were added are under education. I believe that's right. And funding, thank you. I was getting there. I couldn't scroll down fast. Yes. Education and funding.
All right, well, let's just go around and see if anybody has any additions or subtractions they want to do. Supervisor Blevins?
Thank you. Under the, starting off with, let me see if this is under education or funding. I'll bring it up here real quick. Okay, under education, where we have enhancing school safety and security by allotting state funds to make schools facilities more secure, provide for student safety, and prevent future school attacks. I do believe last year we had something, actually, I guess it's the other one, preserving the authority of localities to have school resource officers. I think maybe I've misread that. Hold on for a second. Yes, okay, number 3, yes. So I do want to make sure that we do keep the authority locally, that we can support and fund our resource officers in our school. I do want to make sure that we keep that. And under funding for okay, yes, I think it's the 4th bullet there. strengthen the diversity of local revenues by sharing income taxes and other revenue sources in support of local services by distributing a percentage of the individual income tax revenues, providing the authority to levy a local income tax, or allowing other sources to generate revenue locally for locally delivered services. I would like to take out the authority for us to locally levy income tax. Would like your opinion or discussion on that.
I would suggest that we not limit anything. I mean, some of what we're doing will affect people 50 years from now, and who knows what they could or couldn't do and what was practical. I'm not for instituting an income tax, but I wouldn't want to not be able to do that if that was our only vehicle, for example. And again, it's not today for me. It's, but getting that authority, how many years have we had something similar to this and we haven't gotten it? So you got to ask for me, ask for, all the possibilities, and maybe we'll get some. Because we don't really have real estate tax is pretty close to all that we got. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about having any kind of local ways that we can raise revenue, because what the state keeps doing is they keep saying we're funding education. Well, we know they don't. Okay, that's a given. They don't. We've done better, but they're still not there. Okay, so we get into this sort of area where we're being asked to fund so many things that the state and especially education doesn't fully fund, but yet we're not given any ways to raise local revenue, except for a very few we have, and the biggest one being the real estate property tax, which is so outdated and is so regressive. And so when you look at, is there another way? Is there something that we could do locally to enhance our revenue? I think it's really important to advocate for that, whether it be looking at a sales tax or whatever it might be. I know VACO has been advocating for different ways to raise revenue forever and ever and ever. And that's partly, Sherry, where that comes from, is just, having all these demands and not having a really good way to raise revenue. And so then when you go and you want to raise the real estate property tax, that's when your citizens come and they're all upset. But yet you have to balance the scales to have an operating budget and a capital budget. So I think that's really why it's in there.
If I could just pipe in. So if we go back 10, 15 years when the roof collapsed and we were trying to build the Auburn schools and then the Blacksburg schools, they had one lever to move, and that was real estate. But if they had other options, maybe it might have been better. We don't know, but I don't think that the real estate taxes would have been increased as much as they were. And I don't think anybody liked that.
And there are some counties, like Halifax County, asked to have a 1 cent private sales tax returned to them just for capital for schools. So they had to get that through the General Assembly. But
Well, this one section here talks about 3 things. It's 3 asks. Percentage of individual income tax revenue, also to levy a local income tax, and also allowing other sources to generate revenue locally for locally delivered services. To me, to levy a local income tax is outrageous. When I do my taxes every year, I see it on my form for me to enter my local income tax. And every time I see that, I say, I am so glad the government doesn't have another hand in my pocket. We keep going down this road of taking everything out of people's income. We're going to end up like Europe, where you get to take home maybe 40% of your paycheck and the government keeps the rest of it. And everything's taken care of by the government. That's not the kind of world I live in, but I'm definitely against the local income tax. So I'm in favor of taking it out.
I'd like to add my 2 cents.
Absolutely.
there are other things in this legislative priority that I want to discuss that are much more important to me. I would never be in favor of levying a local income tax. I completely understand your point. And Steve, I understand your point as well, that there are other levers to pull here. So I would be fine with removing levy a local income tax if we can keep the rest of the body of that priority. Again, because there are other things on here when it is my turn that matter a little bit more to me to discuss.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'd be in favor of removing, me, I'm against any higher taxes.
I'd be fine with removing it.
And to Mary's point, I agree that we're having a lot of state mandates and ways to fund it, but to me, this is another tax. And yes, people would be upset if we have to do, if an emergency came, if we had, and our only lever is the real estate tax to raise it up, but people will be awfully upset too if we say, hey, now we're going to tax your income as well. And so that I just am totally against that. And we do, if we take that out and we leave the others, we do have it just, other sources to generate revenue. And hopefully that's going to be with economic growth. And we can do it in a good way that doesn't hurt our citizens, but can help them.
I'd like to add 2 cents. I don't need it to be labeled because it's already covered, like Steve said. And I don't know everything about Virginia, but I know New York City levies a income tax, right? So the chances of us ever levying an income tax would be so small, it's insignificant to me. But hopefully we'll get more levers to pull, because for me, I look at it as a not, oh, we're raising your real estate taxes and adding, instead of raising it this much, we're raising it this much and adding. That's the way I would have interpreted, but it's not our present need. And I like the general tone.
Okay, well, it sounds like that we have a consensus to remove that one section. Secretary Young. Between them 2 commas.
And this just on the law enforcement again, of course, we want to oppose eliminating qualified immunity.
Any other discussion on these items that Supervisor Blevins brought up? Supervisor King, do you have any adds or subtractions from their?
I just wondered about, I'll ask Craig, amendment that Virginia Overtime Wage Act to reinstate the county authority to offer some sick time in lieu of payment. Did they switch
For
it?
1 year.
Huh?
They approved it for 1 year, but I'm looking at
They
Katie
flipped it
shaking her
back.
head too. They've still got to go back and make it permanent. So we need to keep that in there to remind.
Oh, I didn't want to take it out. I
Yes.
thought maybe I thought they had flipped it over.
They did flip it over for 1 year, but they need to go back and address it permanently, which they need to do in this upcoming General Assembly session.
That's the only question I have.
Thank you.
Supervisor Demots.
Yay. Okay. I had 3 and you brought up the first or the third one on my list, but I am coming from a place of ignorance on the Virginia Overtime Wage Act. So is that new this year, or am I just not remembering seeing it before?
It was included in a bill right at the end of the last General Assembly session. That we had to pay overtime for lots of employees.
I can talk.
Please, because I'll screw it up.
Yeah, what happened is, I can't remember which legislator wanted it, but he wanted to institute, instead of making employees have to go through the federal court system, he wanted to make it a state law where they could then file in state court for any wage violations. And so that he claimed, or I think it was he claimed that that's all he wanted to do, and he wanted to make the federal law also state law, similar to federal law. And so that you could go through state courts. But what happened was when they did it, it didn't match. And the way the language read was that under federal law, localities have a right to offer compensatory time in lieu of paying wages up to a certain number, like so many hours, and then you got to pay them out. Where other employers don't have that luxury, we have it because of budgetary concerns mainly. And so that was not in there. The language wasn't clear that it came over. And so opinions were coming down. Attorney General issued opinion say you no longer have the authority. And so what happened was they took it up in the budget bill. When the budget bill was up, the governor was kind of negotiating all that. They did change the budget bill, which then made it only good until for that budget year. So it's good until June of June 30th.
2022.
Okay,
22.
22.
So that's why we need a permanent fix.
okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. My next question probably also is going to feature our wonderful attorney. Amend section 58.1-3203 of the Code of Virginia taxation of certain leasehold interests to allow localities to assess for taxation non-exempt leasehold interest in real property that is exempt at 100%. Can you explain that in regular people language?
Layman's terms?
Yes, please.
Sure.
And is that new, or am I just not remembering it because it's?
No, there's
Not catchy.
provisions, the way it works is, if you're, obviously, if you, someone who's exempt owning real property, like say, a state or a church, when they own property, it's exempt from real estate, and that's an exemption based on the Constitution of Virginia. But there's also provision in there, it says, well, when those exempt owners lease out their properties to non-exempt entities, there's certain provisions where you can then tax those leasehold interests. However, they're very small percentages, unless it's like 99 years. So like if the foundation owned property and a non-exempt company wanted to build on foundation property, but in order to get the financing, they had to get a 99-year lease from the foundation. In that certain circumstance, 99 years is like as if they own it. So it'd be 100% tax,
Right.
not to the foundation, but to that business. And then it goes down significantly to where if it's a 5 or 10-year lease, you're getting very little.
So is this verbiage that was introduced after we started having discussions with the foundation then? Is that kind of the genesis of this, or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My next one does not call on you. So I appreciate your time. In the education section, the fourth bullet point, support school vouchers or tuition tax credit for elementary and secondary students who attend private and home schools. Provide public school students with a voucher or tax credit to be spent on private school or homeschool tuition. Is that brand new? Did that just, okay. So I thought so. That I absolutely do not support. And I think it also flies in the face of our first priority, which is recognizing the state's role in funding quality education. So I would like to have a discussion about a couple of things relative to that. I'm pretty passionately opposed to that being on our legislative priorities. I would have a very difficult time handing a legislator a packet that has that in it because I'm very opposed to it. Obviously, I think all of us can advocate on behalf of ourselves, but I think that that is a very polarizing and partisan issue that we might need to have a discussion on whether or not that is in our legislative priorities.
You've been to any school board meetings lately?
Yes.
Which ones?
No, I haven't been to them. I've watched them online. I haven't physically.
So you
gone
saw
to
the
them.
one at Christiansburg High School?
The one where the parents were coming up to the podium, there was a ruckus, somebody was ejected. Yes, I watched that one.
How about the last one? I don't know, that was just an audio one. You
I didn't watch the last one.
There is a lot of parents that are very upset. Not, I'm gonna even go out on a limb and say, not against the school system, but against DOE requiring certain things be done in schools and be taught in schools. And they don't like it. And they pay taxes. And so we also have another issue that comes to mind, and that is we have to keep building bigger schools because we have more students. So by having a school voucher, you give parents a choice. They could send their kid to a school that's going to actually teach them education and not politics. And you're going to take that kid out of an overcrowded school. That's my reasoning.
I understand your reasoning. I don't necessarily agree with it. I would like to have a bigger discussion on whether something this polarizing belongs in Montgomery County's legislative priorities.
The polarizing is going on in the schools.
But
And this fixes it if the state would do that.
I would argue that it does not fix it, but I'm not trying to change your mind on your passion on it. I'm trying to have a conversation about whether or not something this big belongs in the legislative priorities for Montgomery County. I have a real problem thinking of walking into any of our legislators' office, whether they're for or against this issue, with my name on a document that says we want to support school vouchers or tuition tax credit. This is why I said there are things on here that are very important to me. This is very important to me. I have a real problem with this.
I have a real problem taking it off
Okay.
because this is, if we, parents are upset with what's going on. They don't like some of the things that's being taught. Now, I know a lot of people say they don't like critical race theory being taught. Critical race theory doesn't get taught.
No, it does not. You're correct.
It's not, it's how it's applied. And right now, it seems that the key word in the state of Virginia, and maybe others, I don't know, is equity. And equity sounds very, very fair. I heard the other day, and I wished I could remember what school system it was, but there was a student that had a, wasn't a grade point average. I'm trying to think of what the score was, but it was maybe it was grade point average, 0.15. And they said, he's in the top 50% of his class. Why? Because all the other numbers get brought down. They playing games with all this stuff and people don't like it. Eliminated valedictorian and salutatorian. A lot of people, when their kid got up there, they were very proud of that child for winning that award. Well, that cannot stand anymore because now you're hurting all the other children's feelings. It's just getting so far out of whack that if we don't take a stand, that it's just going to continue. And as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I'm very passionate about keeping it in because I don't think it hurts anybody.
I think it does. It's not a hill I want
How
to
does
die
it hurt
on.
somebody?
Because for every child that comes out of our schools is funding that our schools loses. When you're talking about overcapacity issues, et cetera, we're overcapacity in our schools because we can't afford to build them bigger. We aren't paying our teachers enough because we can't afford to. So every child that receives a school choice voucher to tuition tax credit is taking money away from the rest of our schools. So
But you wouldn't have to build a bigger school if you didn't have as many kids in the school, right?
I am asking, as a colleague, I'm asking you to please consider taking that out of our legislative priorities. I can't vote for it. I can't vote for the priorities.
I understand that. I understand that. And that's why we will get a consensus after we have some more comments.
I'd like to echo Supervisor DeMott's concerns. I'm beyond passionate about taking this out because every penny is needed for public education. This is something my whole professional life I've been against, even before I was on the Board of Supervisors. My whole teaching career, I've been against this because I I was in the system and I saw the need for funding for education and Supervisor DeMoss is right. Every penny you take away is a penny. Remember, you get funding for your average daily membership of the students that you have at school. So you take that away, that's a loss in itself. And then also you're providing a voucher, a tax credit. And I feel it's very divisive for our board. And if it's left in, I can't vote for the whole thing. I'll vote against the whole thing. I just can't. It means so much to me that I wouldn't be able to support our legislative program for the first time in 26 years. I just feel like it's a thing that if you feel passionately about it, when we go to Richmond, you know, you could talk about it individually, but this is, and when you think about, and I know Steve has attended meetings and all, but you also need to remember the parents that haven't been to those meetings, that would not be in support of something like this. And I know in my district in particular, this would not go. So I just have to, I mean, I could get really, I'm trying to remain calm, make my points, but I'm totally against this.
Any other comments?
I'd like to say one thing. I respect both your opinion. Honestly, I really do. I support this, and the only reason is I think parents need to have a choice. Also, think about one thing. And I hate to put this in there, but it is. Rich people get to send their kids anywhere they want to. Working class people need help. I would like to have a voucher for my kids which in school. And I support schools. I do. And each one of you know I do. I support Montgomery County Public Schools. I do. But the thing is, parents is out there telling me, saying, we need to do something. We would like to have a choice. And as Steve said, you know, some parents are not, and probably in my district, as much as Steve's, you know, just not happy with the way things are going in school systems right now. They feel they don't have a voice. And I have been sitting watching all these school board meetings. I've sat here and watched them. And people, like I said, in my district are passionate about vouchers, tax credits, or something. I've talked to several other private schools, and they're overwhelmed with people coming in. Some of them are trying to add on, and I understand y'all's passion, and I do appreciate it. Honestly, I do.
But I'll ask just to redirect. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. We're going to agree to disagree on this and strongly disagree on this. I'm asking this board to consider, we could be, I knew I was going to vote no. I'm hearing that Mary's going to vote no. We could be passing a legislative priorities packet for 2022 without the full support of this board. How does that, what does that accomplish? That's what I'm asking. It's not about changing your mind or making you feel my view or whatever. It's, what does that accomplish? We have the ability to fully support our legislative priorities.
Just one thing. It's just like we brought up for giving the county authority to raise cigarette tax. If each one of you remember, every year I voted for this, but I said I will not vote for that. I mean, did I not? And that's why, and I stated to put it in our minutes. I was not voting for us to have authority to. So maybe, I mean, if y'all could look around and just say you support everything else.
I will not support that. I will not. If that's in there, I will. It's a no vote for me on our legislative priorities for 2022. Full stop.
I'd like to put my 2 cents in here as well. I've had parents reach out to me, including teachers, that have some concerns, valid concerns with things going on in the school system. And you all know I have support teachers and support our school systems, and we are always trying to fight to get every dollar we possibly can to help our school system. But I do believe in parent choice. I believe that, and I'll give you a good example for students that are homeschooled or maybe private school. They were not readily available to the driver's education program that's given the sophomore year as part of the curriculum in public school systems. I constantly would have customers call and say, why do I have to pay a private school when I have paid taxes and that's given for free in the public school? Of course, that's not, for me, I understand that. But for parents that do not like the way the public school system's going now, and I don't think that's anything against, they don't like what the state is doing, basically. And I would like for them to have this choice, to have the vouchers. They're a taxpayer too. They should have the opportunity to send their child to the public school, private school, or homeschooled, whatever they like, and be given the same playing field or the same as someone attending a public school. Of course, we always, and one of our legislative priorities last year was for the state to hold the localities and school systems harmless if the ADM dropped because of COVID and that issue. I think COVID has brought that, people being at home and homeschooled and being at home have given them other opportunities to see what works best for their child. And whether we put this on our legislative priorities or not, whether some parents are going to pull their kids. I've been told many times that this is probably gonna, if something doesn't change, I'm gonna need to take my child out of public school. I respect their decision. So the ADM will be coming down if they're not happy. People are gonna take their children out of the school system. And I would like to give them the same credit or tax credit or voucher that they pay the taxes just like anybody else does. So I am in support of the voucher, but I, of course, do support our public school systems, and but I do want to give parents the choice.
Well, I support our schools 100%, but I do support this, and it hits kind of close to home. I've got neighbors that within the last 10 years have pulled their kids out of the school system for things going on that they didn't like, and they had no means to pay for schooling. So I think this gives people an option, and I think that's what makes this county unique, is we give everybody an option to do what they want to do. I think that just adds to it.
Sarah, you weigh in on it?
My father was an educator. And I think that we have a great school division. And I think our school division can be exceptionally creative with mandates or requirements and things like that, that it could serve almost all students, right? There's always, we all know, we all can't get along, or we can't all agree on the same things, but we often, most often, agree to disagree, and we move on with it. And, if that means my kid isn't listening to this part of this curriculum, then that's my kid's prerogative and my prerogative personally. The statistics out there prove that at least from what I've seen, that the vouchers take money away from the school division. It's not that the children get better educated. So I I can't vote for something that's gonna be a negative. And that just does not make any sense to me. Secondly, I don't like how it's going to be perceived as a politically divisive issue. And we don't need to include it. That is a choice. And sometimes we should just bite the bullet and accept to not include divisive issues. Personally, I respect everybody's opinion. Don't get me wrong. I really, really do. I see pros and cons about both sides. I really do. I especially, for people that can't afford to pull their kids out of school. One of my sister's 4 children were homeschooled. They didn't have the means. They made it happen. There are resources out there for people. It's just not vouchers. There are scholarships to certain private schools and things like that. My sister had to be really creative. Doesn't mean that would work for everybody, but my sense, and I'm not as well versed in public education, is that the government has created public education for every single person to get an education, a good, solid education. Is it going to be all identical to each other? I hope not. If I can say that it would take an act of God to get my kids to get out of public education because of how much my family believes in public education. Because I would make them create it the way that they wanted to learn. I would help that. So the other thing is, I think that we're getting into business that isn't our business. I think if we wanted to change what was going on in Montgomery County, we should be working closer with the school board, as opposed to thinking that something like this is actually going to solve all the issues. I know you're not saying that, but the perception is that this is going to take care of a lot of the issues. I believe that, I don't believe that this is actually going to do that. So.
Well, seeing how very few of our legislative priorities ever come to any kind of fruition. Yeah, the tobacco tax did, but I'm not sure. Craig, do you recall how many have been taken off the list in the last 5 years?
We've had a few that have been addressed. Many times they're addressed at the state level. It's not just particular to Montgomery County. So a few have come off, sure.
Well, the reason I put this on here, I think was summed up by some of my colleagues. I think Todd's point of wealthy people don't have this issue because they have the money to send their kids to private school. But regular folks don't. Yes, you are correct, Sarah. I know people that have gotten some kind of assistance to send their kid to private school for a year, but they go to school for 12 years. So no, there really is no viable option for average people. They have to bow to the will of the Department of Education because the Department of Education oversees that. People are tired of it. I watched a 10-year-old, I apologize if you're watching, but I don't know what you identify by, but having a problem with her gender. She's 10 years old, 10 years old. Gender dysphoria is a rare thing, used to be, but now it's become an issue. And now the schools actually have to kind of, I don't even know the words to describe it, without hurting somebody's feelings, but they're their own class of people now in school. They're having to come up with different ways to accommodate these people when there used to be hardly any people that had that issue, which is actually a medical issue.
It's just that they were in the closet, Steve. They've always been.
No, I'm talking about gender, I'm talking about swapping genders.
No, I understand. They've always been here with us.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
all the
history,
studies that I've read on it,
it's
it's
not new.
never a good outcome.
I think we're going down a road that is not our business.
Well, you were asking my opinion on why I'd like to see it there.
No, I
That's
was
not
asking
what,
your opinion on whether or not you think it's a good idea for us to have a legislative priorities program that almost half of the board doesn't support in Richmond.
yes, I did.
Okay, then you're that passionate about it.
I am very passionate about it. People need to have a voice and they're not getting one. I think Todd said that. I don't know if I was followed up by anybody else. They don't feel like
Why
they have a
aren't they
voice.
here?
They can't do anything.
Why aren't they here? I mean, if it's, they're at the school board and the school board isn't responding to them. So re-elect your school board member so that.
That's right. Re-elect your school board member, but don't put this in here because this is worse.
It's one thing that's not gonna solve the problem.
I think it would solve the problem for a lot of people.
Where in the United States has that actually solved the problem?
No, I don't know about the United States.
Where in Virginia has this ever solved the problem?
Well, how could it solve the problem, Sarah, when the state doesn't do it?
Well, how many school divisions or districts in the United States have this as an option and it
Stop.
has been accepted?
You know that question. I can't answer that question. You know
So
that.
why is this the solution? It can't be the solution yet.
Well, I think a lot of parents think it is the solution.
Well,
That's what I'm
they
hearing.
don't, a lot of people don't know the research or the statistics that say this is not the solution.
Well, I think I represent my constituents. And that's all I can do.
Yeah, well, let's find a better solution.
Well, one thing.
You find a better
if-
solution.
I am happy to find another a better solution if we take this off.
I have found my solution. There it is in writing.
I truly believe that there is a better solution than this.
Well, if you look
Okay.
at what you have under education, the first three bullets, they're asking to have the SOQs funded fully. We're asking to enhance school safety and security, which involves money. And we're asking to preserve the authority for localities to have the SROs, which also costs money, right?
Right.
But then we're turning around and on bullet number 4, we're saying, well, in the meantime, though, we want to take away money and we want to give it to private schools or homeschool, whatever the case may be. No matter what you say, it's going to take away money from public school education. And so I guess what I am disturbed about goes back to what I said. I hate to see our board become so politically divided over something that we have 4 people feeling very strongly about doing and 3 people feeling strongly about not doing. And I mean, I would support taking it out. And I could support the rest of what was said tonight. But I can't support this. This means so much, but I can't do it. And I don't think it sends a good message to Richmond to say, here's our pamphlet, the majority supported it. That's never happened in Montgomery County, the 26 years I've been on this board.
When we go to Richmond, do we hand it to them and say, everybody was behind it?
We were.
I don't ever recall hearing that.
Well, we always have them. We haven't had to make that statement.
We've
Stevie.
given them
Yeah, because
the priorities.
it's been supported. The whole time I've been on this board, legislative program has been supported by the full board.
Well, I don't know of a better place for this than on our priorities. I don't know of any other place.
Mary, I was going back on your educational things. I support the first three, and I don't look at it as taking money away. I think it as giving our citizens the choice. You're not telling them they have to take their child out. You're giving them the choice to use that voucher and letting them decide.
But where's that money coming from?
And if you, okay, the money is, I see what you're saying, okay? But if the school systems do not have those students, then you don't need bigger classrooms. You don't need the more teachers. There won't be a cost. If you don't have that student, that's not an additional cost. So it balances out.
You have fixed costs that won't be covered.
Right.
The fixed costs are there whether that child's there or not, correct?
Yeah, but if they're technically going to public school, they get paid for the ADM.
Yeah, like if you take,
But if they're officially not in school, well, then you still got the space that you gotta pay for.
well, let's take two students off of Daryl's bus. And they're going to private school. Daryl's bus is still gonna cost the same amount. Let's take 10 students out of a school, the cafeteria staff is still gonna have to be paid. I mean, you sort of have to look at the whole picture. I mean, some of these private schools cost $10,000 a year. Is that what we're saying here?
We're
No,
saying
what-
parents need to be able to choose.
They.
You
Sorry.
can choose now.
They're paying the taxes that are supporting the schools and will be paying those same taxes that support those same schools, whether they get a voucher or not.
I'd like our legislative priorities, if they pass, to be passed saying who voted for what on them. When we hand them to our
Yeah.
legislators, I want us identified by name.
Yeah, me too.
I think we've finished the conversation about school vouchers.
Right? So we have a consensus to leave it in.
What does the word consensus mean?
Just majority,
Majority agreement without
the
voting.
railroad.
But we want a real vote on it. We will have a vote on it. And as April said, I'm gonna request too that our names be put.
And that it's not just in the minutes, it's as
It's on
a
the,
footnote.
it's on the thing we hand to our legislators.
Okay, that was it. Out of work session. Anybody want to make a motion?
You just ended with April.
Right.
You didn't
Nobody else got to talk about
anything
anything else.
else.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was a long conversation.
The only
Go
other,
ahead.
the only other thing that I have that hasn't been covered is the transportation for Route 81. Wanting, the language just doesn't seem to really stress the fact that we're paying for a lot of fire rescue on 81 that isn't related to Montgomery County. It's just, these transient people that for a split second are in Montgomery County and all of a sudden we're paying for that. And I'd like state funding to pay for that.
Well, one of the things Rockingham County had brought up, they're in the same position that they wanted to ask for some kind of additional funding from the state towards their fire and rescue, because they're always having to run out too. I don't know if we can do that or not.
That's one thing we're gonna be looking at as part of this study that we're doing with the Department of Fire programs is some communities are doing revenue recovery where they are dispatched to calls out on the interstate and they bill the insurance companies of the folks that are involved in the incident or that represent the vehicle owners and collect revenues back.
That are insured.
That are insured.
But that shouldn't have to happen, that a county has to develop something like that, right? It should just be, hey, this many calls, we'll reimburse 80% of them, or something like that, as opposed to, how about the state do the insurance claims?
Well, for our legislative priorities, we could add language, like requesting an enabling language to recognize the financial cost.
Burden.
Yeah, because we're not, necessarily going and saying, this is the solution that we propose
Yeah.
to this problem. We're saying,
Please help
please
us.
recognize that we have this problem.
Right, because we could buy the ambulance that we really are forced to buy now. Not that it's a bad thing, but we need an ambulance in, one more ambulance in Shawsville that we can't really afford at this point in time. But if we weren't paying for things that we shouldn't be paying for, we could afford it.
So how would you word that?
I have no idea.
Vicky?
Marty.
You're up.
Marty?
I mean, we could let us think about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and along that same line of transportation, I do think, and I appreciate Emily reminded me of this too, we probably need to, and we could modify the Interstate 81 bullet a little bit to just make a general reference to asking the state to address declining revenue for our overall transportation network and needs. And it's 81's important, passenger rail is important, but you know, when we have David Clark in here, we're talking about all the other issues that we continue to deal with a smaller and smaller pot of money for larger and larger projects and costs. And we need to reference something
Some of
about, we need the state to address the ever declining revenue sources that we have to address.
sort of like the SOQ equivalent.
We do, because the smart scale's really been detrimental.
Yeah, it's not.
Well, even the maintenance on what we already have,
Right.
brush cutting for one. For Christ's sake.
We can craft something to polish that up if everybody's okay with us adding that in. I appreciate you mentioning
I'd like for anyone to still be specifically.
that.
called
Absolutely,
out.
absolutely. That is the part,
Yeah.
but yeah. As we talk about some of these other projects we're trying to address, we won't get to them in 10 or 15 years
Yeah.
based on the fund.
That's all I have.
Daryl?
I don't, everything else sounds good to me.
Any further discussion?
So I got a question. Are we going to have staff write something further for transportation then?
That's
What would,
And then have it come back?
yes, what the purpose of having it on work session tonight was to hear, and we did hear the comments and concerns, and trying to get a consensus on where everything is. We'll have this back on your first October agenda for you to vote on and move forward.
All right, is there a motion to come out of work session now?
Motion.
Second.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Chair Christianski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, next item is old business.
He wants a break.
It is 9 o'clock. All right, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute.
10 minutes.
10?
3 hours, something.
Okay. All right, you're gonna be here all night. 10-minute break. We'll be back at 10 after 9. All right, this is old business. First item is DePaul Community Resources Property Tax Exemption. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes. Did we ever get the information that I asked for? Their, what profit they made and all this?
We sent out the packet that they filed, and that's all the information we have in terms of their public statements.
So we never seen, I guess, their financial statements.
That, some of that was included in that. Yes,
I
sir.
remember reading some of
Yeah,
That was just some of it.
what was sent.
That's what's reported.
I'll re-say what I said the first time to come in front of us. If you can forward almost $1 million bill, you don't need tax break.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, if you call a roll.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bowne?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No,
Chair Christiansburg?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 no.
All right, next up is new business. First item is schedule a public hearing request for real estate tax exemption, North American Islamic Trust.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? This is to advertise.
Advertise the public hearing. Yes, sir.
Hearing no discussion. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bowne?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins? Aye. Mr. King?
aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Chair Christiansburg?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is resolution authorizing the advertisement to create the NRV Passenger Rail Station Authority.
So moved.
Second.
Get that? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This is very exciting and moving forward. Very exciting for us.
I already love riding the train.
Y'all can be thinking about who wants to be on that board. All right, hearing no more discussion. Madam Secretary?
Ms. Bowne?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Christiansburg?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is resolution of commendation for Connie Byer, General Registrar.
So moved.
Second.
Everybody wants to second it.
Make the pick. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just again, we just want to congratulate and thank Ms. Connie Byer for all and her department for their service and dedication. And even now with early voting, they're continuing to serve and be efficient. And we're so proud of their department. So congratulations.
Very good job. Any other discussion? Now, this is, we're going to present this to her. later.
Did we get all of our signatures on that resolution?
Yes. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bowne?
Aye.
Chair Christiansburg?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item, National Community Planning Month of October.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Glad to see that we're commending National Community Planning Month and being good planners that we are. We're doing it in September instead of October.
Excellent. There you go.
No more discussion. Madam
There's a few
Secretary?
times we're ahead of time, right?
It'd
Go
be
ahead.
half over if we did it at the next hearing.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bowne?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Christiansburg?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item up, Fire Prevention Week.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? They say this year's theme is learn the sounds of fire safety. So they've got a plan to get, especially get the kids involved in this by hearing their alarms going off. So Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Mr. King,
Aye.
Ms. Biggs.
Aye.
Ms. Motts.
Aye.
Ms. Stone.
Aye.
Shepherd.
Aye.
Ms. Blevins.
Aye.
Chair Chakowski.
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, now we're to that part of our program that we get some valuable information, starting with our county attorney. No report, no supplement. All right, next, our county administrator.
Just a couple of items this evening. I wanted to update the board. We conducted interviews today for 3 finalists for the Director of Tourism position. I've had 3 very good finalists for that. Hopefully in the next week or so, we'll be extending an offer and spent the afternoon. It was really good to do that today. And in that same vein, within the next couple of weeks, we've narrowed down the field for the Assistant County Administrator position. And we'll be interviewing those candidates. So hopefully we have our board meeting on the 12th. I can give you a little bit of an update on how that goes. So looking forward to that. We want to remind everyone of the October meeting schedule. Our first meeting will be on Tuesday, October 12th, instead of Monday. Monday is Indigenous Peoples' Day, so we'll meet on the 12th. We also have a called meeting on Monday, October 18th, to talk about finances and our year-end position, and also begin or continue some discussion about ARPA funds and what we might do. Then we have a joint meeting with the Montgomery County Public School Board on Tuesday, October 19th. And our second regular board meeting of the month will be Monday, October 25th. I keep going over those dates because I really messed them up when I tried to set up that meeting a couple of weeks ago. So just want to remind everybody. And in all things crazy for 2021 going on, when I went to lunch today, I got a notice that we had an earthquake in Montgomery County, and I didn't even feel it. But we had a 2.6 magnitude earthquake about 4 miles north of Lafayette. And I don't know if anybody, did you feel it? Nope. I didn't feel it either, but apparently a lot of folks in Salem felt it. But yeah, so chalk that up to 2021 as well, but an earthquake in Montgomery County.
Any comments from MVP on that?
Did not hear a word. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll go down the list, starting with Supervisor King.
No report.
Next is Supervisor Blevins.
No report, just a few things to shout outs. First of all, congratulations to the Christiansburg Demons on their successful homecoming game and victory over the Radford Bobcats. Also wanted to say I attended the Pollitt Community School Center Centennial Celebration, celebrating over 100 years, and it was a great opportunity to fellowship, and former students shared stories, and I put a little post on my social media. It was great, even as supervisor, learning new things all the time about the wonderful community of Pollitt and all the history and heritage there. Shout out to the Kiwanis Wilderness Festival, and we had great representation from Montgomery County. Department of Social Services was there doing the cotton candy, giving out information on foster care and adoptions. We had emergency services, we had a fire and rescue there represented, and then of course the sheriff's office and Montgomery Floyd Regional Library. So we had, and the Montgomery Museum. So we had lots of booths and participation, and it was a great day for all.
All right, Supervisor Demots.
No report.
Supervisor Shepherd. No report. Supervisor Bone.
I would like us and the community to look at facts and statistics as we try to come to, as I'd love for us to come to a consensus about the school voucher item on our legislative agenda. So I will do my part to make sure that I try to take as much political stuff out of it and just present facts. So I am happy to work with anybody to do that for us, because I think we have the capacity to become, potentially have consensus on this issue. I think the community asks us to use that information to provide the right solutions as opposed to just a solution. So if anybody wants to do that with me, I'd love to do that.
Vice Chair Biggs.
I would say that I would like to see if maybe after everyone has a little chance to think about it, there could be some kind of compromise as Supervisor DeMonts was trying to talk about at the beginning of our discussion on our legislative priorities. I think that it is important that it be from all of us, but if a compromise can't be reached, I understand where we all are coming from. Now, for good news, last Thursday, I got to sign the official papers to receive $5.3 million from the federal government to pay off the airport authority's debt on the land that we purchased from Virginia Tech. And this was quite an accomplishment because we thought we would get some money, but we weren't sure we were going to get all of it, and we did. So we found out late Wednesday night, and I signed papers Thursday. Then they had to be overnight to Richmond that night and signed by the attorney on Friday. And that was like pretty much the deadline. They didn't give us much time, but we got it done. So hopefully we'll be seeing that money. Today, with the help of Craig and Angie, I participated in a webinar with Senator Kane, and I thought it was just going to be giving our input about what we were spending the ARPA funds on, but like at 10:30, I found out it was a panel with 61 people in the audience, and I was part of the panel. So I was like, I better get my notes together, which I did. But anyway, what I wanted to report to you was sort of interesting. VML had chosen Ivor, you know where that is. They have 300 people in their little town, and Virginia Beach. The city of Virginia Beach as their representatives, and VACO chose Montgomery County and Pennsylvania County as their representatives. So I told Craig and Angie, like when Virginia Beach went, they came in with their mayor, their administrator, their finance person, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, but it worked out fine. So basically I reported that we were going to be taking our time and we're being very deliberate in looking at the whole picture about how to spend these funds, because it's a once in a lifetime. And what we're doing is going to have such an impact on our county and its citizens for years to come. So we want to be able to spend the money wisely and well. So I reported that we had put aside the $7 million, as Craig had reminded me too, for the universal broadband expansion. And that on October 18th, when we have our meeting, we're going to be discussing, you know, what to do about the other $12 million. And sewer and water came up in the discussion today. So I thought you might want to know that. And of course that came up in our discussion too. Little Ivor was replacing all of their water meters with part of their money because the water meters were so outdated. So I thought that was interesting. So another thing that came up, they wanted to know, would there be any public outreach to folks, like, you know, community leaders, groups, you know, about spending the money? I said we had not talked about that. So it was really interesting to hear. And what we tried to thank Senator King for was his advocacy, and Senator Warner's for flexibility in spending this money and to continue to have that flexibility, and also to when the infrastructure bill comes through. We want flexibility if there's any flexibility that can be had with that. He sounded pretty positive about the infrastructure bill coming through at some point in time. So it was an honor to get Montgomery County again out there. So we have ourselves out there. So I want to thank Craig and Angie again for their help on that. And that's it.
All I've got is I'd like you all to be thinking about doing another one-time supplement for our employees. I'm not set on any number, but I know, I think we did 2,500 last year in two drafts, 2,000 and then 500. We ever do the other 500? Yeah, we did.
Just for deputies, she said.
It was just for deputies.
I think that's.
Thought we were gonna do it for.
500, but then I'll have to.
Yeah, we've had so many numbers flying, I can't remember.
Well, at any rate, I'm not hung up on any one number, but I know that the state is giving Brian, which deputies are getting money from the state, the 3,000?
Comp board, yeah.
Comp board, the comp board positions. So we'd like to go ahead and do the same for the rest of them too, or I would like to see that done. Because that doesn't seem to be fair when the guy you're working with in the next car is getting a one-time supplement and you're not, but
That's number 23, right? That'd be 23 of them, it's not.
yeah,
True.
yeah.
That's
Something like
about
that.
right.
Yeah, I keep up with that.
But at any rate, something that we should be thinking about. I was always under the impression that we could take it out of the ARPA funds, but we may have other pots that we can pull it from instead. So, but just be thinking about that, and it'd be nice to act on that, get it done before Christmas.
I know employees would be most appreciative of that. I didn't mention in my report, COVID just keeps on happening. Deal with that, having employees out, having a number of employees that are dealing with family members that it's affecting right now. And so COVID's not going anywhere.
Please get vaccinated.
Please don't demonize the unvaccinated. And if nobody has anything else, we're adjourned.